Hello everybody and welcome to Planet Sky FF, the world where everything revolves around £50,000. My name's Serge.
And my name is James.
And this is the one we've been waiting for all week, Sky Fantasy Football. FPL is dead. Dead.
Alright, you're having a rant because you got an overall rank which doesn't matter at the moment that's giving you a bit of a nosebleed. Why don't you show off for a change?
Okay. You don't want to swap your rank for my rank then?
Not really. I'm not bothered. Go on.
Only 10,000 places between us. Is that right? Is that all right?
Yes, I probably will be for a few weeks to come yet, so revel in it, sir.
We are...
I mean, if you beat me in this game this year, people are going to die out of astonishment.
DJ Newton called me out and said that you do all the talking on the Sky podcast when I put out Sky FF Kevin De Bruyne a tweet about his full house, saying that I probably didn't even remember to pick him. Well, DJ, I'm going to do all the talking now.
Go on,
Yeah, let's run down our teams and then have a little rundown on what we're planning in the next week, if there is anything. And then we can look at some Twitter questions that we've had as well. A solid week this week for me, helped by 2 monster hauls from captains on Sunday and Monday. Started the week with Aubameyang, as I think so many people did. Disappointment overall, but made up by Antonio and Pereira both returning on the Saturday. You own both Pereira and Antonio, right?
I do, yeah.
And the Aubameyang captain.
That's correct.
So that was not too bad. I was quite happy with that. On the Sunday, Van Dijk picked up a 10-pointer.
Standard.
Clean sheet. Passing tier 2. So that was quite straightforward. But Harry Kane's 4 assists and the goal, I don't think I could have hoped for in any way, shape or form. And the irony is that I own Heung-min Son in my second team. I've spread my bets with my first team and second team. Some people have gone the same. I've spread my bets. And I had Son, but I didn't captain Son. But he picked up a nice 25-pointer. And then, obviously, De Bruyne did a De Bruyne, didn't he, on Monday
De Bruyne
night?
did what I saw someone put on Twitter, forgive me, I can't remember it was. Someone said that's the first time in 5 years someone's hit all the tiers.
Passing tier, shot tier.
Goal, assist, man of match, passing, tackle, shot tier, the lot.
Yeah. And he got 2 points for turning up as well, yeah?
And he got 2 points for turning up, yeah.
Incredible performance by Kevin De Bruyne. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that from Kevin De Bruyne this season as well. I think he's going to be there or thereabouts.
The reality is Kevin De Bruyne got 22 points from a penalty and a dodgy assist, which shows you the weightage of what he can be in this game. Yeah,
no doubt about it. So overall, end up with 140 points, which is a monster haul.
That's brilliant.
No doubt about it.
And what's your Gameweek rank on that, by the way?
Gameweek rank was 2,300. Let me just confirm that for you.
Very similar to your overall, right?
Sorry, no. The Gameweek rank was 2,916.
Yeah.
And that's left my overall rank at 2,965.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And the main thing is I've jumped from 73k to 3k. So it's a massive, massive jump up. And I'm happy for it because I know last week, obviously, I was 73k is fine after 1 week. I wasn't worried about it. But I'm definitely not worried about it now. I'm in and about. Although having said that, and we'll talk about it, the fact that I'm not going to do anything in the next week makes me a little bit nervous as well. But we can talk about it.
Yeah, you can do something about it if you're nervous about it.
How did you get on? And just to chuck in, I used one transfer, which was obviously Aubameyang to De Bruyne on the Monday.
Course.
So down to 39 transfers now.
Just before I do mine, just a point from Ian Parrin, I saw tweet this, and I think this is really good advice for new listeners. He said, someone asked him for his overall rank, and his comment was, I wouldn't even look at it till December. And I think that's very, very fair, that overall rank at this stage really, really doesn't particularly matter. And that's because that if you've used no transfers and you're ranked 2,000 or whatever, or like yourself, 2,000 with one transfer used, you have made a brilliant start. But for those who perhaps have not made a great start, don't worry about it.
Yeah,
genuinely don't worry about it, because you've got no perspective of what transfers people have or haven't used ahead of you. There are going to be people in the top 100 at the moment who I promise you they've used like 6, 7, 8 transfers already. So don't worry too much about overall rank for those who've done badly. For those who started really well, well done. My game week score was 95 points, which felt weak against my 91 points, which felt very good the week before. Probably because my game week rank was nothing like yours, but I'll certainly take...
Where did it get you? 93 points, 94 points as a game week rank?
Oh, it was about 38,000 or something.
Still all right.
So I still...
Top 50k.
Green arrow from there, I've gone up from 20,000 to 12, 13,000, something like that.
Decent.
I generally... I'd have to look to remember, but roughly there. So it's on the rise, it's okay. All I wanted was a steady start. I made 2 transfers on Monday. I went Vardy to Kevin De Bruyne. My thinking on that was purely a case of just a little bit of better coverage for the Arsenal-Sheffield United game as opposed to the Leicester-West Ham game. Plus, what I've seen of Jamie Vardy in the games has not overly impressed me. You know, they got 4 at the weekend against Burnley and he wasn't involved at all. He got the 2 penalties against West Brom. You can't guarantee that's going to happen every week. Well, at least Aubameyang at the moment is involved.
Yeah.
And I looked at it and I probably went, I'm probably unlikely to captain either. Therefore, I've gone with it and gone, I think Aubameyang will outscore Vardy over the next 2 game weeks. I've also removed St. Maximin for Jack Grealish. It was a 3-way toss-up between Rodri, Foden and Grealish. Obviously, in hindsight, I wish I'd gone for Phil Foden, obviously. But the deciding factor on Jack Grealish was it does give me an alternative option for captaincy when they play Fulham next Monday. Now, from what I saw from Villa on Monday, I'm probably unlikely to use that option. But at time of making the transfer... Sorry,
Ledley King.
Sorry, Ledley.
And for the ones on YouTube, you might have seen James just
stacks Ledley King.
I'm
always knocking something over. I mean, having the coffee on my right's quite dangerous, actually. I'm probably unlikely to use that captaincy option. I'd probably still rather go with Van Dijk, to be honest, on Monday. But that was the main deciding factor to go for Grealish over the other 2. Plus, I've been toss of a coin whether I thought Foden was or wasn't going to start on Monday. And that's always going to apply with Phil Foden, although... Great asset. Rodri's going to tick over really, really nicely. I just decided I wanted to give myself that extra captaincy option. In hindsight, like I said, I wish I'd gone Phil Foden. But I'm very happy with an average of 93 points from the 2 game weeks, even with 2 transfers used. If I average that during the course of this season, I will either win Sky or come very, very close. That average will be monstrous. There's not going to be game weeks where the score is going to be this high. With people like Son, Kane, Calvert-Lewin, De Bruyne, all basically going a bit ape, basically. Gone
even
a bit
Richarlison, who's a Sky legend, did well with his 3 assists and what have you.
There'll be a few of Sadio Mane and that as well.
Yeah, of course.
But a lot of these guys actually not highly owned. So it's not caused too much damage. I don't think there's too many people who've got the combination of, say, Calvert-Lewin and Heung-min Son, for example. There won't be too many. If you have, really well done. So it's not been as bad as it could have been, and I've picked a squad for 4 game weeks which was meant to have consistency. I think that's another reason why I ended up going with Grealish, is knowing he is definitely going to play. And that's all I wanted was solid selections, like Willy Bolly's in my squad, for example. I know he's never going to pick me up any Tyrians. It's just a case of clean sheet or no clean sheet. But I knew that he would play all of the 4 games for Wolves. And I think they're a side that you can target this week, Wolves, even with the 2 fixtures to go. The fact that they play Sunday is interesting. You can get a gain of fixture off certain teams. They've got 2 games, West Ham and Fulham, which are very, very approachable. The problem, I think, will be, is it worth the risk? And it probably boils down to Jimenez or no Jimenez, because I think to get only the 2 games out of it, you want a captaincy return out of it. Now, Jimenez against Fulham could appeal, actually. But I just generally feel that he's not a player that you'd want to captain. But I think for those who've got no Wolves coverage, that would possibly the one that would make me think, yeah, I'm interested in moving off, say, I don't know, let's take the advantage of, say you've got Fernandes in there, for example, and you've only got 2 forwards at the moment. You might want to consider, after he's played Brighton on Saturday, that the move to Jimenez versus West Ham, Miss Fernandes versus Tottenham, then you've got Jimenez versus Fulham. You might decide that's worth it. Yeah,
possibly, maybe. Now, we know a lot of the listeners and engaged managers will have Kevin De Bruyne. If Kevin De Bruyne at Leeds is on the same day as Wolves against Fulham, and Leeds do the same thing they did against Liverpool, split 5-5 and just let City run at their back line, then Kevin De Bruyne's going to have a field day there, potentially.
I think Wolves versus Fulham will be the Sunday. A match day 4. I also think it will be the same day as Liverpool play at Villa. So I still think you're going to find it challenging to captain Jimenez over a Liverpool asset.
We don't know yet the fixtures for that weekend, game week 4, which is a little frustrating.
Can I have a guess?
You can have a guess. I mean, there's unlikely to be Monday game because of international break, right? So they all go off to their clubs.
At the time of recording, which is nearly 12 o'clock on the Wednesday lunchtime, we've had no announcement as yet in terms of fixtures. I think we could get one as early as today because something opened up last night for me with West Brom losing in the Carabao Cup. I think there are 2 fixtures that could get booked in for next Friday now. And I say the Friday because with the internationals following match day 4, we're highly unlikely to have Monday night games. England play Wales in a friendly on the Thursday, so surely it's not going to be Monday night games. But it works now for 2 games to quite comfortably go on the Friday night, I believe. One is Chelsea versus Crystal Palace. Palace are out of the competition. Assuming Chelsea play in the league on Saturday, and obviously we don't know what the status is now of Tottenham's rearranged game with Leyton Orient, but let's say Tottenham do get a bye and were to play Chelsea next week in that competition. With Tottenham playing Europe on the Thursday, that game is certainly going to be on the Tuesday. Therefore, there's still a 3-day gap. Chelsea Palace the Friday works. So too now does Southampton and West Brom because Brentford have knocked both of those 2 out of the competition. I think we could get on Friday the 2nd, Southampton versus West Brom and Chelsea versus Palace, or one of them, which is possibly going to be dodgy for some people if it's Southampton versus West Brom. I think the Saturday we'll have, as you said, Leeds versus Man City would probably be the standout. I think we'd be looking at Everton versus Brighton, Newcastle versus Burnley, and one of Leicester versus West Ham or Arsenal versus Sheffield United. And I say one of because I think it will be the loser of the Carabao Cup tie between Leicester and Arsenal. And then the rest go on the Sunday. So I don't think it's a major issue. What you'd be looking at there is...
We've all got players from all these clubs for coverage anyway. Yeah. So it's one that we just cross that bridge when we get to it.
Chelsea Friday, City Saturday, Liverpool Sunday. It's nothing to majorly worry about. You've probably got Aubameyang against Sheffield United falling into either of those 2, for example. So I don't think it's going to work out badly. The one that would maybe be a concern for people is if Southampton West Brom ended up as the only Friday game, might cause some people some concern. And you might then consider, is it worth going for Danny Ings for the one game, for example? We'll cross that bridge if it happens. But I suspect it will be Southampton, West Brom and Chelsea Palace. And the majority of us are going to have some sort of coverage there, aren't we? Surely.
More than likely, yeah. Let's talk about captaincies as we do each week. We've got 3 match days in this game week, and then we can look at some Twitter questions that people have asked. Inevitably, there's going to be some good stuff to cover off in there as well. On this Saturday, are you looking past Timo Werner?
No, I mean, it's quite straightforward for me because I don't have any Manchester United players, which currently looks like a decent decision, but I know they're capable of popping off. I think if I had Bruno Fernandes, I would captain him on Saturday, I think, maybe. That might sound ridiculous. The other thing with Werner is the majority of people who have got him will captain him, I think.
You're sticking with the pack with that decision. That's what I feel as well.
And that's the temptation of where I'm at in terms of principle strategy up to the overhaul is exactly that. Stay with everyone. He's
only 22% owned, Timo Werner. I thought it would be higher than that.
But that 22% are all going to captain him on Saturday, most likely. So, yes, Werner or Fernandes would be the standout Saturday. If anybody had a preference for Fernandes, I wouldn't have an issue with that. Because I think it'd be a very different game for United to what we got against Palace, going against Brighton. Monday's podcast we had with our Brighton correspondent, FPL Seagull, and United correspondent is my cap plan. Is well worth having a listen to for tactical strategy on that. In terms of space, United are likely to have far more of it this weekend. But yeah, it'll be Werner for me Saturday.
The Sunday is a little trickier. I've got Harry Kane and Kevin De Bruyne. Harry Kane at home to Newcastle, Kevin De Bruyne at home to Leicester. Harry Kane on paper has the better fixture, but Kevin De Bruyne, not on paper, on video, on audio, is the best player. So it's going to be hard. I'm going to captain Harry Kane. Okay. The armband is on Harry Kane at the moment. But it's going to be one that I'm going to have to watch the City Leicester game through my hands, I think, because Kevin De Bruyne at any moment could be good.
I think those who have Kane or Son will captain Kane or Son, because I think that was probably part of their strategy, even before the Southampton game, to think, yep, versus Newcastle, I'm going to captain them.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think that's what those who own those players will do. For me, very straightforward to go Kevin De Bruyne. And personally, if I had both, I would still go Kevin De Bruyne. He is likely against the lesser side to play in that high position again, which is worth saying. I don't think it's going to last forever, but I think it will last up until the overhaul. Him playing with probably two protecting players in Fernandinho and Rodri behind him. So Kevin De Bruyne, mass appeals, no doubt there, be my captain Sunday.
There's obviously the ownership issue as well, where Kevin De Bruyne, what we mentioned, at 50%. Harry Kane's only at 15%. So I could easily be swayed if those numbers change as well significantly before the Sunday to make the safe move, which will be Kevin De Bruyne potentially. It's a toss of a coin on that one for me. And then on the Monday night, for me it's Van Dijk. He's actually the only player that I'll have on the Monday.
Well, I would have Van Dijk. I've still got Aubameyang or Jack Grealish. I think, like you, yes, I would most likely go for Van Dijk. Just interestingly, though, Aubameyang's ownership is still higher than Van Dijk's. Aubameyang's overall ownership, and there's no point looking at top 1,000 at the moment. Aubameyang's overall ownership is 40%, Van Dijk's 31%. And that might make me lean the other way from a security point of view, purely as well because I don't actually think either of them will particularly return.
Yeah, what you don't know is the overlap, right? How many own both? So 30% own Van Dijk and 40% own Aubameyang.
There'll be a lot of people who own none.
Yeah, there's quite a few.
Off that number, yeah.
Yeah. And then it could be another asset, a Salah or a Mane, that might get some interesting ownership. I think the Sunday's the one that's going to polarise the scores a little bit with Harry Kane or Son or Kevin De Bruyne or another City asset.
I think for that particular game, and I wouldn't recommend buying him if you don't have him, but I think for those who have Mohamed Salah, would probably be the best choice for Monday night.
Yeah,
for that particular game.
I agree with you on that, James. There, I think Salah could be a good shout. Let's have a look. Should we answer some Twitter questions? Because normally the Twitter questions do cover off some of the thoughts that have been in our heads as well.
Let's do it.
Yeah. And you've set your captains already?
Yeah. By the way, I have been reminding Suj every day.
You didn't on Sunday.
Did I not? No.
There was one day where I'd already done it, and I was like, I'm waiting for James to message me, and he didn't. But no, maybe it was the Monday because we actually went. We drove home
because I saw
together.
you all fucking day.
Yeah, but we had another hour. Like that's not the issue. The issue is that witching hour from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock when something happens and you forget about it. So it's all good. I made my transfer to Kevin De Bruyne, so far we're all okay. Right, Gary Shepherd. I know it depends on a few things, but what would be considered a really good weekly score? I've only started this season and I thought 150 plus this week was a great score until I realised lots of other people had the same. The thing is, this week is, like James mentioned earlier, 90 points a week as an average will win you the competition. So that's what you should probably consider a good score if you're maintaining an average above that.
In my opinion, not that high.
Yeah.
No. My average is not going to stay that high.
No, of course not. And 150 is a freak week. You're only getting 150 pluses where all of your captains pop off with double, triple returns, and potentially there might be a double game week in it as well.
You're going to have weeks, and we're all going to have these weeks where the popular captain's all blank, and the average score is going to be sort of somewhere between 40 to 60, even with 3 captain possibilities. We're going to have weeks coming up where it's going to become only 2 captain possibilities. So that average is going to come down a little bit. So the high scores are covering you for that, right? Mm-hmm. I think an average of, 80 is extremely good as an average across the season. 85 will probably win it. That would be my guess.
FPL Addict, our friend Chris, what results did the new tackle bonus throw up this week? I haven't been looking into it in mass detail. I know the boys at Hub who do the podcast do a little bit more on the stat side of things. I think it was very similar to Gameweek 1. There was just a couple of people in and out, but otherwise it was basically the same.
Everybody does more on the stats than us.
Yeah, that's true.
Only one player so far has picked up top tier tackles in both fixtures. And interestingly, it's Dallas of Leeds at 6.4 million. And why that's particularly interesting is played two very, very different teams there in Liverpool and Fulham, respectively, and picked up top tier for tackles for both. He's 6.4 million. I think he's going to be on a lot of people's radars after overhaul. Wolves, Villa, Leicester, Palace, Arsenal, Everton, Chelsea, West Ham, Newcastle. It's a very mixed bag for Leeds. But if you can take a regular 4 or 5 points off him every week at that value, that's very interesting, actually. The problem is, of course, you don't see any clean sheets in them at the moment. And unlike what the perception of Dallas and Ayling was before the season starts, at the moment, I don't see attacking returns likely in either of them. But that basic rate of sort of 4 to 5 points at 6.4 million is very, very worth considering. So that's the one that would stand out. Yes, there are more players winning tackles than under the old system, but it's not a huge difference at the moment. You're probably getting around 20 to 25% more.
Yep.
Kevin De Bruyne, for example, probably wouldn't have picked up that tackle tier last season, would be my guess, without having looked at the data. And there's a few others. There are more tackle tiers, but don't put too much weightage on it, is the message at the moment.
And Chris also asks, has any player got max tier points in a game or more than KDB on Monday? The answer is no. KDB cleaned up on the tier points for the most in 5 years, right? So he's done.
That's what I saw someone put on Twitter, yeah.
FPL Wilson asked a question. I can't answer this, James, and I'm purposely not answering this. Players you're looking at post-overhaul, because I've blocked it out of my mind.
Yeah.
I feel like I just want to get through the 4 weeks and then assess the 4 weeks as a 4 weeks rather than trying to chip away throughout the 4 weeks.
I think for me, it was always, yes, watch games, eye test, get a perception of what's happening, get to the Monday and know that I'm going to Kevin De Bruyne, formulate a plan if there was any injury problems. I mean, St. Maximin, for me, the removal was don't hesitate. He's an injury risk and he's also underperforming and I don't see returns in him at the moment. Move it on for 3 games of somebody else immediately and a possible captaincy in there as well, which I'm highly likely not to use now. But I've taken the game. I took a view on that and go, do I think Jack Grealish will score more than 10 points in St. Maximin between now and overhaul? And went, yes. And if I end up captaining him against Fulham, then definitely yes. So I felt it was worth the risk. But in terms of formulating plans for overhaul, all it is now is trying to get a picture in my mind around certain teams. So, for example, if you take the example of Everton, there's actually loads of interesting options there with Dean. Michael Keane's actually quite interesting for this game, possibly. Richarlison, James, Allen, Calvert-Lewin. The other thing I was looking at, which is interesting, was strikers. So generally, we would look at strikers and go, well, you probably need 3 powerhouses because of the captaincy. And we've had periods like with Pookie last year where it was like Pookie and Abraham. If you go there, how are you ever going to move away from them was part of the issue. Interestingly, there's a few players here this year. So here's some forwards for you, priced at under 9 million, for example. Greenwood, Mitrovic, Ollie Watkins, Chris Wood, Neil Maupay. Could all be quite interesting options to jump around between the 8 million and 9 million bracket if the timing's right, for example. And I'm kind of leaning towards that idea of having one of these now as a sit in there for a period. I just think it's going to allow me a bit more power in the midfield area. I think Andrew Ferguson was right to highlight on the Hub podcast on Sunday that this year doesn't feel quite so empty in the midfield area. There are options that feel nice, like James, Harvey Barnes. Careful, you're going to knock the thing over, Suj. So there are plenty of options in the midfield area that are potentially going to attract this year. So I'm conscious of that. That's a possible swaying of thought in the forward area of possibly going with one cheaper and knowing I can get away with it because like the likes of Wood, Maupay, Mitrovic, all at a similar price.
Yeah, it's a similar strategy to FPL where there's a lot of 6 and 6.5, isn't there?
Yeah.
Okay. Jamie Dodd asks a similar question to what's a good score that Gary Shepherd asked. So there you go. And also asked, I've not got a B team. Do I need one? Well, that's a good time for me to jump in and say, we have a public service announcement from Sky Fantasy Football, which we're not getting paid to make, James. But if you are playing Sky and you want to be in the Cup competition, which has £1,000 on it as well,
well done.
Then you need to click on the Cup thing. It's got a big green banner every time you log in saying, get registered for the Cup.
Friday.
Make sure you get your teams into the cup, opt in before the Friday deadline. And the answer to that question, Jamie, is that potentially people are using their B team as a cup team.
So a lot of people use the B team for punts, for example. We've seen Liam Doran, last year's winner, use blanket Southampton defence. I think Heskebo's had blanket Wolves defence. So there's different ways of playing it. My strategy on this is it's a team for the cup. With an attempt to win it, with the idea of using no transfers unless I've got somebody who's legitimately out for 3 or 4 months. So guess what? I started with exactly the same team for both my teams. My second team this week scored 51 points.
Yeah, mine scored less because
I didn't bring in a certain person this game week.
I bought Sterling instead of De Bruyne instead of Aubameyang in that team.
So my strategy with my second team will be to pick 11 players from 11 different teams after overhaul, and to leave it basically dead with just selecting weekly captains, or daily captains rather, until that cup competition starts. Then I want to have a stab at it. If it does very well as a dead team and I get there and it's, 10,000 or so, and I've got 40 transfers left, I might think differently about it. But the plan is to use it as a cup team.
Yeah. Champman FPL Scout, a certain Rob Pick that is, on Twitter says, John Egan, would you keep him just for the one fixture against Arsenal, or move him on and attack someone else with 2 good fixtures?
I think this is the sort of one where Wolves needs a solid look. I actually wouldn't rule out Southampton either. I know that sounds ridiculous after the weekend, but you look at Burnley and West Brom and think... I spoke about this on our main FPL podcast yesterday about Southampton's next 2 fixtures. They're not going to get done in behind against Burnley and West Brom because they don't have players like Zaha and Son. So it's not going to be so much of a problem for them. So actually, in an odd way, the Southampton guys, particularly Bertrand and Walker-Peters, who are still quite likely to pick up tackle tiers, are not the worst options. But I think you'd look at Wolves and go, I'd say to a John Egan owner, do you expect anything away to Arsenal? Do you honestly expect a clean sheet or anything from it? No.
Definitely not.
Look at Wolves' next 2 fixtures. What do you think? Take the example of Willy
Minimum
Bolly.
10 points.
And then I think it's borderline. Whether you consider that's worth it or not. My instinct would be it's not.
Yeah, I was going to say the same, James. I think for me, just because the overhaul is so close, I wouldn't bother. I think if your intention would be to captain Jimenez in match day 4 against Fulham, I think it will be the Sunday most likely. If that's your intention, then I really don't mind moving off any player on Saturday to Wolves on Sunday to pick up the West Ham game and then the captaincy against Fulham. I don't mind that at all. The other one is Podence, who is 6.6 million, who I think longer term there's a risk because they bought Semedo in. Traore's going to move higher up the pitch. They've got Silva who's going to develop. We think they're going to buy another attacking player as well. But in the short term, could be a really, really good prospect. And he might enable you something else. So if you've got 2 problems, for example, say you get an injury issue on Saturday. I don't know, let's just say Bruno Fernandes gets injured on Saturday and you've got him in your team. I don't mind the idea of, say you've got Fernandes and Werner. I don't mind the idea genuinely of on Sunday powering from Fernandes to Podence and Werner to Jimenez or something like that. Value-wise, it might even give you a 3rd player. If you genuinely think there's an advantage, take it. My instinct would be that there probably won't be an advantage at the moment. But then, say if Werner gets injured on Saturday and that Chelsea game's the Friday night, I might need to force something here. Whereas at the moment, I have no intention to make a transfer. So you should always have your eyes open to possibilities. And it might be that something comes up injury Saturday-wise that forces my hand. St. Maximin might be fit for the Tottenham game on Sunday, but for me, it was the measuring up and going, he ain't performing in that system, playing left in a 4-4-2. And he's potentially at this stage going to be out and get no minutes. So therefore, I felt it was worth the risk to take the advantage on Jack Grealish. If it had happened in Game Week 2, I could see it. Game Week 3, so close to the overhaul, you're now getting closer and closer to...
So I think a good example would perhaps be, I've got Mateus Pereira of West Brom, right? Who's just sitting there at the moment. If he was to get injured this Saturday against Chelsea, I don't think I would buy Podence on Sunday.
Exactly.
So I think that's the answer, is probably no, unless it manoeuvres you something that gets you a great captaincy option, which with the way we think Game Week 4 will line up,
you probably already have your great captaincy option.
You probably already got it.
Ian Parron, with the uncertainty over televised game announcements now going into autumn-winter and possibly beyond, is keeping a hold of transfers even more valuable than in previous years?
Yes, possibly. Really, really hard to say, because it might be that we get out the other side of this international break, and once the Champions League draw is done and that, you might find that they book in a longer period. They might not. There's no requirement from the clubs or anybody at the moment for the broadcasters to pick games long time in advance. There's really no point. Plus, the other thing is, we think it's not going to happen now, but the broadcasters are not going to schedule games at 10 different times if there's a possibility for fans to get back in the ground.
Yeah, but we know that that's not likely till March.
We think that's extremely unlikely, of course. Now, if we get clarity on that, it's like, right, no one's attending sporting events till 2021. Then once the Champions League and Europa League draws are done, they might as well just put the fucking schedule in the calendar. So it might be that we get longer than we expect. It might also be that we're starting at the overall and we've only got information for Game Week 5 and 6, for example. In which case, we'll all need to think about strategy-wise a little bit different to what we normally would. My advice would be, let's cross that bridge when we get there.
Yeah, I'm definitely taking the approach when we get to overhaul to try and hold back to set myself up with a team that I don't have to tinker with too much until Christmas if I can avoid it. I'll obviously have to make transfers during that time, and I'll want to use 5 or 10 transfers to try and get myself a gain rather than to try and fix problems.
I would expect the match day 4 announcement latest Friday, before the game week starts. I think it's possible with that West Brom result last night that we might even get it today, actually, because I think it just opens it up clarity-wise now. I think what we'll then get is, once the European draws are made, then they can make announcements for match day 5, 6 and probably maybe 7. I don't see them announcing much more than that at the moment.
Joe Finley Badder, Amrabat man, he said, why did I bring in Sterling instead of KDB? All I would say, Joe, is at least you did it in Game Week 2 and you've got plenty of time to make the move back and capitalise on KDB's points for the rest of the season.
You did it, Joe, because you fancied Sterling as a very good differential. That's the answer. And it's okay.
Yeah. KG_Sky FPL. Any thoughts on taking a punt on Van der Beek for budget reasons instead of Fernandes? He seemed to play more advanced role when they were both on the pitch versus Palace. I bought KDB yesterday, so I can't afford Fernandes until the overhaul, but can get Van der Beek in one transfer. Well,
no.
They've only played one game, firstly, Manchester United, which they didn't play particularly well in. He didn't start that game and came off the bench. He was obviously fit, and Ole chose to start Daniel James on the right ahead of Van der Beek, who could have played there, Mason Green was on the bench as well. I just think it's too early for us to say, okay, Van der Beek's a potential alternative to Bruno Fernandes. There are situations where you can get a cheaper player that covers you off, and you think, you know what, I don't need to go to Aubameyang because I can get Lacazette and it'll get you 70-80% of the way there. I don't think Van der Beek is in any way covering off Bruno Fernandes potentially. Not until overhaul. Anyway.
I think do not, and this probably goes for a lot of things at the moment. Like, for example, what I said about Southampton not having the same problems in the next 2 games. I spoke about this at length yesterday. And I also spoke yesterday about Fernandes and the fact that he went very deep against Palace because you're not going to pick up pockets against them when they've got the lead. They're not going to allow you space. So the best way Fernandes to find space in that particular game was, yes, to come deeper and create from a deeper perspective in that particular fixture. So I don't know if there's anything particularly in that. I wouldn't be worried about Fernandes' place in the team versus Van der Beek at the moment. I think he gives them a different option. I also think Van der Beek can play in multiple options. I think in certain other games, Van der Beek will play deeper than Fernandes, by the way. So I wouldn't read too much into that on what you saw in a 25-minute spell, personally.
Yeah. We have a question coming in from Steve Smith. Seasoned FPL player, but new to Sky. My overall rank is 660, but I have used 4 transfers already.
That's okay.
Is it beginner's luck? Have I used too many transfers? My team's looking set until overhaul. I think 4 is not too bad. I think 4's okay. If you were at like 6 or 7, I'd be like, hang on a second, you've really steamed in here. But
the best thing to do now, if that's a great rank, right? And probably if I'd said to anyone, look, you're going to use 4 transfers and you're going to be in the top 1,000 early on, they'd probably go, yeah, okay, I'll take that. Analyze now, in hindsight, was it worth making all of those transfers? That's the only advice I can give at this stage, and learn from it. So because it's worked so far doesn't mean you should fucking bolt your load, basically, as soon as we get on the other side of overhaul. Yes, if your team looks good, sit now. 4 is probably 1 or 2 more than you'd want to use, but if it's paid off for you, it's absolutely fine. The other thing is, don't regret what's happened. When I say analysed, I'm saying don't go back and look at mistakes, but go back and understand if it worked or not. Now, in these cases, it probably has. Don't go back and regret. You can't change what's happened. We spoke about this with someone last week who we know made a real fuck up with getting someone in after a deadline pass. You got to wipe your brain from it, otherwise it just haunts you. Move on, think of the next. I think ideally 1 or 2 transfers pre-overhaul is where you would want to be. I didn't want to use the second, but I'm happy to adapt and say, okay, I had a problem, I need to fix it. But yeah, calm down now.
The other questions, James, most of the other questions revolve, if we haven't answered them already, revolve around people that are in a bit of a quandary and don't know what to do with St. Maximin, Tierney, Egan, and so on. There's everybody's kind of thought, is now the right time to make the move or not? I'm trying to decide whether or not we have been helpful or unhelpful in what we've kind of framed the situation in so far on the pod.
I think look at it and go, take each case individually.
Yeah. Tierney, for example, probably be back for the Liverpool game. I asked our Arsenal correspondent, he said it was precautionary, he should be fine.
The other thing with Tierney is, were you expecting anything away against Liverpool anyway? You would have taken anything above 0 basically as a bonus. You got him in for the 3 other fixtures.
Correct.
So if he's back for Sheffield United, that's a definite hold. Egan and St. Maximin, I think what you want to do with them, St. Maximin is harder to judge because at the time of recording, we don't really know what the injury detail is, and we're probably not going to know till Friday.
And they'll do what they can to get him fit.
But play. I think let's take the example of Egan. You're probably not expecting anything at Arsenal in match day 4. Ask yourself, if you replace him, where are you going? And then map it out. What do you expect to get extra from this transfer? If the answer is less than 10 at a minimum, then I definitely would not make that transfer. That's where I would put it. And I think you'd want to have serious confidence that you're above 15. That's why I talk about the idea of Jimenez, for example.
Because you can captain him.
If Werner was to get injured Saturday, and then you look at Jimenez and go, right, I've now got 2 games of Jimenez, West Ham away, and a possible captaincy against Fulham, with Werner playing nothing now if he was to pick up a bad injury. Is that worth 10 points? Yes. Don't sit on it and think, it's a week before overhaul, it's not worth it. Take advantage. Otherwise, no, I probably generally wouldn't bother.
There we go. Thank you for tuning in, listeners. I was just thinking what we can say. I really feel like everybody's in limbo mode of trying to maneuver the next 2 weeks before overhaul without making any moves if they possibly can help it.
Nobody wants to at this stage make transfer.
But everybody's eyes are getting... heads are getting turned by certain players that are doing well, and obviously when you factor in your FPL head as well and you think, this guy is really doing well. So at the moment I'm still going to be making no moves this week, barring any disasters and injuries, and see where we get to Gameweek 4.
If you've got a player in your squad who's doing shit at the moment, but you're going to get 2 games out of him, just leave him. Do not even consider removing it, in my opinion, because our opinions now will definitely be different on certain players in 2 weeks. I think Southampton is a great case of that defensively, where I genuinely wouldn't be surprised if they picked up at least 1 clean sheet, if not 2, in the next 2 games.
Interesting. There we go. Guys, thank you for tuning in to Planet Sky FF, where we talk about Sky Fantasy Football each and every Wednesday. If you haven't listened to the other podcast that we put out this week, yesterday we had a full rundown on the FPL weekend with an analysis of every single match. On Monday, Clash of the Correspondents with our correspondents for Brighton and Manchester United. We had Sam and Gary on talking about their teams and what they think will happen this weekend. Tomorrow is our 500th podcast. Planet FPL 500 is the hashtag to use on Twitter. So do make sure that if you have any questions or anything you want to add into the stories that we're going to read out on the show, that you jump on that hashtag. It's on James's Twitter feed at Planet FPL Pod. And on Friday, we'll be back at you with a live stream from James. We'll be doing a live stream just to answer all of your questions. If that's not enough content, head over to patreon.com/planetfpl, where we have additional pods, Slack channels, prize leagues, and some other stuff as well. Fun and games for you to join over there.
Boom.
It's getting ropey outside with COVID. Make sure you're washing your hands. Stay safe, everybody. Ciao for now.
Thanks, everyone. Be nice to each other. Good luck. Cue music, please, man child.